Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and today I just got back from watching Tales of the Empire on Star Wars Day. Happy Star Wars Day, by the way. And yeah, the first thing I gotta say, I'm just gonna be doing all 6 episodes, which means, you know, we have the Morgan Elsbeth stuff and the Barriss Offee stuff. Each one got 3 episodes, just like the format of Tales of the Jedi. The first thing I'm gonna say, though, is that as a whole, and I think a lot of people are gonna end up agreeing with this was not as strong as Tales of the Jedi was. And I think you can kind of break it all down to simply that Tales of the Jedi was answering questions to characters that we've known for a long time, especially the Dooku stuff. It was filling in gaps. It was showing us things that we had never seen before, conversations that were very significant. And it seemed to really recontextualize a lot of events that happened. You know, like you basically got the why of it all. You know, like we knew Dooku turned evil from being a Jedi Master and all that, but we've never really gotten in detail like, okay, but why did he do all this? You know, like it's always been very vague, and you know, like you just kind of like didn't get much of a detailed answer, and then we finally got that. Tales of the Empire, on the other hand, when it comes to Morgan Elsbeth and Barriss Offee, you know, it's kind of like we found out that Morgan Elsbeth was a Night Sister, right? And you're like, okay, so how did she go from being a Night Sister to working from Thrawn, or working to Thrawn, and then the Empire, and being in charge of this little tiny town, right? And while we got some of those answers, they did not feel nearly as significant. It kind of like a lot of this felt like stuff that could have been delivered through some small exposition somewhere. You know, like they could have told us a lot of this in this season of Ahsoka. You know, if Thrawn and Morgan had exchanged a handful of lines. You know, remember when I designed those TIE Defenders or whatever? Like, yeah, okay, yeah, I remember that. And then that would have been it. You know, like. So it just didn't feel like it had much weight to it. Like I don't feel like anything's recontextualized, you know, like I'm not gonna go watch Ahsoka and suddenly feel very differently about Morgan Elsbeth. It's like, well, you know, once I found out she was a Night Sister and she had survived, like I pretty much knew all this, you know, like now I kind of like I can visually see some more of the details of it, but like I essentially knew this story already, and that, you know, that's kind of made it feel a little empty, you know. Granted, you know, it's not bad at all. Obviously the animation is amazing, the choreography, the fighting, it's really cool. You know, we got to see some like the mountain clan, so we got like a better idea of like, okay, so there are other witch clans here, which by the way might play into the Acolyte having whoever those other witches are in the Acolyte TV show. But you know, I think just overall, like Morgan Elsbeth, it's like, okay, so even in between episodes, we make these big jumps to where we still have questions. Like, we leave off where she's, you know, basically she leaves the Mountain Clan who saved her. And they're like, okay, you've chosen this path of revenge. Bye. And then next thing we know, she's trying to sell the Empire on these TIE Defenders, and she, you know, she is somehow in charge of this planet that has all these natural resources, right? And even the villagers are like, oh, we shouldn't have let her take control. But I'm like, how did that conversation even start? She showed up one day, said, I can make a deal with the Empire, just put me in charge of your planet, and that's it? Like, is that all that happened? I guess so, because they didn't bother to really explain it beyond that. And then Thrawn just kind of likes her plans and likes her ideas, and be like, oh, we're gonna need people like you because the Empire is gonna slowly die away, so you know, we're gonna need people like you one day. And then, you know, the Ahsoka show happens, and we do see like essentially a prequel to the events, like the direct events of The Mandalorian, when we're introduced to Morgan Elsbeth. You know, like that distress signal gets sent out, Bo-Katan hears it, you know, etc, etc. Ahsoka shows up at some point, I guess. I kept on expecting to see Ahsoka because I'm like, wait, wasn't she in the forest? But you know, I guess that'll happen later at some point. And I don't know, it just, while it was cool to see some of this, and it was cool to be like, okay, so there she is as a Night Sister. She's the one who came out with the TIE Defender. She's trying to sell it. The Empire kind of sucks, and Thrawn knew it sucked the whole time, and he's kind of like, you know, he's kind of preparing for an eventual end to the Empire, because he knows, like, yeah, this isn't gonna last forever, because these people are all, you know, they're all prophets over lives, and so, you know, the morale of the military is gonna go away, you know. And while some of that was interesting, like I said, it just, I'm like, okay, but you know, none of this is, it doesn't feel like it has the same weight as those Count Dooku episodes did, for example, you know. And then now we have the Barriss Offee stuff, so let's go ahead and move over to that, I guess. Barriss Offee, this has been a question that we've had for a long time. Like, she got arrested after she bombed the Jedi Temple. She tried to frame Ahsoka. You know the whole story, right? And so we've always wondered, well, what happened to her? Or what happened to her? Order 66 happened. What happens to one that's in jail, right? So she gets inducted into the Inquisitors. She has to go through this whole initiation process against some other Jedi, and this was definitely the most interesting part, like getting us to know more about the Inquisitors and stuff, because I know there's a book that came out, I think Dawn of the Red Blade, which I still need to read, but you know, the Inquisitors is one part of Star Wars where we still have a lot of questions, you know, like how many of them are there, what is their initiation process, which I guess we kind of know now. But as for Barriss Offee, like, this first episode's really interesting. And then the next episode, she's a full-time Inquisitor. This is sometime later. It's not clear how long, in, you know, what point in time this is in the second episode of hers. They're hunting down a Jedi, and, you know, she kind of sees of, like, oh, these Inquisitors, they're just gonna straight up kill people, you know? Like Barriss had fully bought into, like, oh, we're here to bring order, and the Jedi were evil and bad, and, you know, we're gonna do things the right way, because, you know, Barriss did believe that the Jedi had lost their way, but now she's seeing that, like, oh, the Inquisitors are actually gonna just kill innocent people to get answers and stuff, like, they're, oh, okay, so these are definitely not the good guys then. And she kind of, you know, like, she was talking down this Jedi to surrender. The Jedi almost did. And when the other Inquisitor goes to kill the Jedi, Barriss just kind of, like, immediately turns of, like, well, then you got one more Jedi to deal with. So now she's just fully back to the light side. And it felt like a real quick switch, you know? And I don't know how long she was an Inquisitor, but it feels like, I'm like, are you just now realizing what this group is? Like, what you guys do? Because, like, now you're, like, really flipping up, like, you're switching sides really fast. Like, now you're back to the light side again. You're like, oh no, I'm gonna save this Jedi from the Inquisitor. And then we do another jump in the third episode. So last episode of the show, and we're doing another jump. And again, now we're starting at a point where I still have many questions. It feels like a lot of story happened, because now she's helping some people escape. I have to assume that this is connected in some way to the path that we saw in the Obi-Wan series, because, you know, she's like, this mother and her child show up, or was it a father? It was a whole family. It was a whole family, yeah. Mother, father, and child show up, and they're like, oh, the Inquisitors are after my kid. They tested his blood, and they got the Jedi powers, you know, in the blood. And so Barriss is gonna make a phone call, gonna help them escape, and the Inquisitor shows up. I believe this is the third sister or the fourth sister. I don't remember the numbers of the Inquisitors. This is the yellow one that was in Obi-Wan, by the way. The one that got, I don't think, any lines, maybe like 1 or 2 lines in the whole show. But this is her, so she's playing a much bigger part in this than she has ever played anywhere else. But yeah, you know, they kind of have like their big fights, and the Inquisitor ends up getting lost inside the caverns, and I don't know, I don't think that this is supposed to be Ilum, but it kind of looked like Ilum, like the way that they're like lost in this ice cavern here. I'm sure it was not Ilum though, because at this point Ilum would have been under Imperial control, right? So yeah, there's no way that that's what this is, because we saw Illumin Fallen Order. That thing's under Imperial control, so this must be somewhere else. Anyways, she's lost in these ice caves, and it's kind of a strange thing where like the Inquisitor can't find her way out, and I get it's all metaphorical, right? Like it's a metaphor for like being trapped in this Imperial Inquisitor system, and you know you can't escape it, otherwise they'll kill you, you know, and there's no way out. And then Barris is like, there's always a way out, you know. So like, okay, so you're literally lost here, but you're also metaphorically lost. Okay, it's an interesting choice, but all right. And so the Inquisitor's like slashing away, and Barris is just behind her, and Barris just gets stabbed. And I was like, you know, and Barris is laying there dying, and the Inquisitor's like, no, I'll get you out of here, I'll save you. And now this yellow Inquisitor, the one from Obi-Wan, is now good, I guess, and is trying to save Barris. And the last thing we see, the episode ends this way, she's carrying Barris out of the caves, and so now we're left again not knowing, is she alive? Did she die there? Is this Inquisitor just good now, I suppose? You know, so for me, again, now you got like a second Inquisitor flipping sides seemingly really suddenly. And I get that this is supposed to be years later because they have Barris looking like much older now, so I assume this is well after the Obi-Wan show, well after a bunch of stuff. Again, they don't make it entirely clear how long it's been, but yeah, I don't know. And that's where the episode ends. We don't know who the person is that she called. I guess we can assume maybe it was, I don't think that they established that. Maybe it was Ahsoka, maybe it was someone else from the path. But yeah, guys, I don't know. For it to end there, and then that's all we get for Barris, I'm like, I guess we'll see if they ever make another season of Tales of the Empire, because we're kind of left in this place where, like, if you're not going to say that she died right there, then we're just going to be stuck waiting again for Barris, a character that we've waited like 10 years to get any kind of update on, or not even 10 years, more like 15 years. You know, and then Morgan Elsbeth, you know, I think her story was sometimes stronger than Barris's story, but also because we know where it ends. We saw her die in the Ahsoka TV show, spoiler alert. You know, it also kind of feels like there just was not as much story there. I think that's ultimately what's happening here, is that Barris and Morgan, there's not enough character history, there's not enough story there, you know, like while there is stuff to fill in, there are gaps of knowledge that we've been like kind of wondering about. Ultimately it all kind of ended up being kind of what you think would happen, right? Like the most interesting parts were when Barris is being initiated, or you know, when Morgan is you know, escaping from Dathomir. We're meeting these other witches on Dathomir, you know, like those are the interesting parts. But like, as far as, you know, the majority of their stories, it was kind of like you can pretty much guess it, you know. And that, I think that's the thing, is that like when we saw the Dooku arc and he fights Yaddle, and then they're having like this whole fight, and Darth Sidious is right there, and Yaddle figures everything out, and then Yaddle tragically dies, and you're like, oh my god, Count Dooku is the one who did, you know, like that was all new information. They were answering several questions all at once, you know, like, and then your brain kind of goes into these directions of like, oh, but what if this had happened instead? It would have been insane. Whereas here, they answered some things, but ultimately, like, it felt, I don't know, it felt kind of empty. It didn't feel as significant, the answers that we got, and we're still left with several questions for both stories. And I'm like, oh, all right, I guess. You know, like, are we to assume that Morgan Elsbeth had been controlling that system well after the Empire fell because she was working on the Eye of Soul? Like, if they had shown her communicating with Thrawn, or communicating with the witches in the other galaxy, like we know that she was from Ahsoka, like if they showed that, and she's like having these, like, you know, I think she mentions she had a vision, but like, if they just showed it and they showed her talking to those witches, and then like, oh, I gotta build this machine, and we gotta ready the Eye of Soul for, you know, to go try and get Thrawn back, and you know, this is all part of the plan, kind of thing. Like if they had shown any of that, that would have been really interesting, and then they just kind of chose not to. You know, or if they had shown Ahsoka arriving, you know, and her first like having to try and deal with Ahsoka, because by the time the Mandalorian shows up, Ahsoka's been in those woods for like a couple weeks now, I think, right? Like, and she keeps on trying to send bounty hunters after Ahsoka, and it's not like that would have been interesting even. But we just didn't get any of that, you know. And then Barriss Offee, like, if she's part of the Path, or if she's talking to Ahsoka, or if she's talking to anyone else who works on the Path, like Quinlan Vos or something, you know, like if that's what's happening, that would have been really interesting. Instead, we're getting like these emotional bonds between Barriss Offee and that one, I think she calls her Lynn, which, you know, we're hearing that name for the first time ever. The yellow Inquisitor alien, like, you know, like that Inquisitor was essentially a background character in Obi-Wan, right? Like she was there, but she had maybe 2 lines ever. That was it. And now suddenly we're supposed to like be invested in Barriss Offee's relationship with this character that we're basically meeting for the first time. I don't know, guys. This was a weird one for me. There are things I like, you know, obviously, you know, like I like what they did. I think it was just the subject matter, you know. I think there's probably other characters that we need to know more about at this point in time, that have more of a history, more of an impact on, like, you know, universal galactic events or whatever, and overall, like, when we get these answers, it's gonna feel like, oh, this kind of recontextualizes everything, you know. And I just don't feel like we got that, you know. Like it was nice to finally see Barriss again, but it was also like, okay, so she might have died at some indeterminate point in time, by this Inquisitor who's also now trying to save her. And that's, you know, I don't know. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Kind of feels like none of this was worked up to. It just kind of happened really quick, you know. And maybe this is all a result of the episodes being so short. You know, they were what, 10 minutes each or something. And I think they jumped forward in time too much, you know, and they didn't feel like they had any kind of like real, I don't even know, thematic connectivity, you know. I mean, maybe Morgan Elsbeth's did, right? Like you see like her path to revenge kind of thing, but you know, and I keep on coming back to the Count Dooku story because it was so well done, but because, you know, in Count Dooku we start with him kind of young, and then, you know, he kind of sees like his first glimpses of like, hey, maybe the way the Republic does things, not so cool. Maybe the Republic is the bad guy sometimes. And then later on we see like, oh, the Jedi did this. Maybe sometimes the Jedi aren't cool. Maybe sometimes the Jedi are the bad guys. And then, you know, finally the last episode, he like, oh, Qui-Gon's dead, and Yaddle's here, and I'm gonna go talk to Palpatine. Oh, now I gotta fight Yaddle. You know, like it feels like it was like a real build up to an epic moment, you know. Whereas this, I don't know. I guess, you know, we can say we know more definitively what was up with Morgan Elsbeth, but I don't feel like a whole lot was added, and they could have explored more. That's the other thing, is like part of it feels like it's the subject matter of exploring these two characters specifically that we both know, but we also don't know, you know. Does that make any sense? Like, obviously Barriss Offee's been around for a long time, you know. She was in the movies as a background character, and then she was, you know, she was in the occasional Legends material, kind of, like, sometimes. And then she was in the Clone Wars, as, you know, she's in a couple of different arcs in the Clone Wars, but it feels like we barely got to know this character, and then she disappeared for 15 years, and now we're just, like, kind of Okay, and then this happens 5 years later, and then this happens 10 years later, and then she maybe dies, and then that's the end. I'm like, hold on. Okay. To be honest, I think maybe all 6 episodes should have been dedicated to just one of these characters, and they could have gone more in detail. The episodes maybe could have been longer, but as it stands now, I'm just kind of left with like, you know, we got some cool shots, we got some things definitively answered, some new pieces of information, but none of it felt that important. And I think that's just the biggest thing. Like, I walk away from this being like, none of this felt super important. I'm not gonna walk into Ahsoka season 2 going like, oh, now that I know this, you know, this is gonna happen. I'm like, this doesn't seem like it added anything. I think that's just kind of like the thing, is like, you know, maybe we have more questions about Barriss Offee, I guess, but like, we already had questions. Now we just have different questions and not that many, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it's kind of frustrating in that way. Anyways, I'm rambling on. Let me know what you guys think about Tales of the Empire. Were you disappointed in this one? Did you want to see more? Did you want to see just different characters entirely? Did you want to see different points on the timeline? Because for me, some of the, you know, years and decades even jumping that they did was a little odd, I think. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Let me know your opinions. Or were you perfectly happy with this? Or did you think that this was just as strong as Tales of the Jedi? Yeah, for me, I'm like, they both did not show nearly enough, and also they jumped ahead so far in the timeline that they showed too much almost, you know, because I'm like, well, I can't care about that because you jumped 10 years later and now you're showing me like a 10-minute segment where she maybe dies. I'm like, how am I supposed to feel something right now? I don't know. Anyways, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.